Welcome to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, the podcast where we dive deep into the journey from vision to reality. I'm Kelly Jackson, your guide on this path of self-discovery, transformation, and intentional living. Here, we explore everything from mindset shifts and personal growth to spiritual alignment and entrepreneurship, sharing insights, stories, and actionable wisdom to help you live a life in harmony with your dreams. Every episode will dig into what it means to not only dream big, but to actually consciously create the life you envision. Let's turn your dreams into real life. Hello, welcome back to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It. I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for tuning in, for being intentional, for actually going to a podcast platform, going to your phone, whatever it is, however you got there on your computer, and you typed this in, or you pushed it, or you did something intentional. You took action and you arrived here, where you are allowing my voice to enter into your ears. And for that, I'm grateful. I appreciate this time that we get to spend together. When I'm recording these episodes, as I've mentioned many times before, I'm doing it alone in a recording studio. My only companion is my reflection, which there's actually two of my reflections in the glass there, the window. And however, I feel like I set my intentions. I do a little meditation before I sit down to start recording. I set my intention, a segment of intention, and get in the right space, enter into flow state, and I imagine how I want to show up, and I imagine how I want to reach you, and I imagine how I want to support you and inspire you and educate you and entertain you and be authentic and real and true when I sit in this chair behind this microphone, speaking into the void, because really that's what I'm doing, and trusting that those who resonate with it will tune into the frequency. You'll pick it up. It's there. All of this is all there. Every episode I've recorded up to this date, and we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, which I'm really excited about. We're not going to talk about that today, but all that to say, this has been nearly a year of doing this, right? Of pouring into this podcast, and it's been so fulfilling, and I'm doing it. I feel called to do it. I'm doing it because I know, because some of you tell me, and also my intuition lets me know, even if some of you are not telling me, but I'm really grateful for and appreciate and thankful for those of you who do reach out and let me know how the podcast has impacted you in some way. But getting back to this, it's like, I know that this is finding who it needs to find, when it needs to find them in the divine right time. And these episodes, they're here. It's an archive now, right? That's the great thing about a podcast. It's like you can access any episode at any time. And whatever phase or season you're going through at that time, there's an episode for that. And this is all here. And even some people maybe have not tuned in yet. That's okay. When this resonates, when this message that I have, that I've been sharing, this will find who it's meant to find when it's meant to find them. And if you're tuned in right now, that means we're on the same frequency. We're tuned into the same frequency. So, hey, nice to see you here. Nice to have you here. It's nice to be here together. And I'm going to do something a little different today than I guess I've been doing. And I'm taking the advice of a mentor and friend, and I'm also leaning into a little bit of a feeling of an intuitive feeling too, about a pivot in a way. And so what I'm going to do a little differently today is I usually have at least a little outline, right? Like that's typically what I come in with, because I do the recording studio for, I book it for like several hours, many hours. And I do that so I can batch record, because that just makes the most sense. That's the way to go. And so I come prepared, because there's power in planning, right? Because I know what my schedule is. All of these things have to coordinate to create rhythm and flow in my business and in everything that's happening. This is the way to do it. And so I will have an idea ahead of time of the topics that I'm going to be covering, and I have a way that I decide what topics I'm going to be covering, right, ahead of time. And then I'll have an outline, things I want to make sure I cover and that I want to talk about, maybe teach about. And I always throw in personal stories. I always do. There's always something personal in there. However, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do something totally different. I have nothing. I don't even have a piece of paper in front of me. I have nothing. And I'm sitting here with the microphone in front of me. And I'm going to share some personal stories. I'm just going to share. It's going to be a conversation. Honestly, I don't even completely know where this is going to go, because I had and have some ideas of different things I want to freestyle riff on. But this is where I'm going to start. I have a really fantastic guest lined up for next week. I'm not going to tell you who that guest is yet. But I think as a preface to that episode, this episode is going to be me freestyling about my journey we're going to start with mental health. And there were two things that are last month, let's start with where we are right now. So, as some of you may know, if you know my story, some of you may not know my story, so I'm just going to say it again. I was first diagnosed with clinical depression at the age of 11. I was in middle school. They said I had a chemical imbalance, that my body didn't produce enough serotonin. This is the story that I was told. I started being medicated for depression at the age of 11. And then soon following that, it was like ADHD, medication, anxiety, medication. There were also physical things that were happening at the same time in my life at the age of 11. At the time, I wasn't making any correlation. However, that would not come until the journey I'm on now. But so I was also diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, again, at the age of 11, 7th grade, very young, having to do these upper GIs and bare emenas and all these procedures. The testing that I remember were so unpleasant. And now there's a reason I'm saying all this. So this is something, most of my life from childhood until adulthood, until my 30s, I was taking medication, not still for the irritable bowel, but for the mental health stuff, or for the, well, that doesn't mean I still wasn't having gut health issues. I just wasn't taking medicine for that, but I was still taking medicine for the depression, the ADHD, and the anxiety. And this is even, I took a break on those meds while I was pregnant each time, but then after nursing, returned back to the meds each time. And it wasn't until the intentional journey of self, which is what I, refer to my journey that started in 2016, following a major life change. I left the marriage that I was in. It was a 15-year relationship, a 10-year marriage inside of that 15-year relationship. We started dating when I was a teenager. And I wanted something different. And that is when I decided my personal journey was, and as a disclaimer, this is not medical advice. I am not giving anyone medical advice, but I am sharing my personal story. I wanted something different for myself. So I started a daily meditation practice, amongst a lot of other things. And long story short, here we are 9 years later from starting that journey, and I have traded all medication for meditation. Okay? I don't take medicine anymore. I haven't in years, 8 years more. Not even a Tylenol, not an aspirin, nothing. No pharmaceutical, no pills, anything like that. And my mental health is better than ever. And I don't suffer from anxiety. And I don't take medicine for ADHD. And I'm high functioning, and I get lots of sleep every night, and I'm not burnt out, and it is possible. And so there is something, so this guest that's coming next week is one reason I want to hop into this topic today, but there was another reason. I was working alongside someone just last week, and as we were working alongside one another, another person had gotten into a cold plunge and was kind of making conversation about how much they enjoyed it. And as everyone, or if you know my page, I also love cold plunging and ice baths and all of the things. And they commented how ever since they had started doing it, it had really helped with their depression. And that was all that was said. And later, I was still working alongside this individual, and they said, kind of out of the blue, this was a good bit later, they said, this was them speaking. They said, I'm surprised that person said that about having depression. And I said, what do you mean? Well, I don't know why you would tell people that. I said, well, I talk about the fact that I was diagnosed with depression all the time. I talk about it on my podcast. I write about it. I blog about it. That's not a taboo topic for me. Mental health is really important. I think that it's a topic that it's okay to talk about. Just like we talk about our physical health, mental health is important too. And this person responded that if I was in line at the movies and I had diarrhea, I wouldn't go around telling everybody I have diarrhea, but there's this medicine I take that helps it.
And that was all that was said. I realize when I hear people share their perspective on situations, like we're going to use this one for instance, that mental health needs to be talked about even more until people don't put it in the same category as having diarrhea. I don't know. It's even diarrhea. If you want to talk about that, talk about that. That to each their own. What I'm saying is this. To not just that person, but to some people. And there was a point in my life when I believe I probably would have been one of those people who felt like, you can't talk about having depression, mental health, all of these things. It wasn't talked about. It was something that carried a lot of shame. I remember as a child, as a teen, hating to take the medicine. I remember telling my mom, like, I don't want to have to take this medicine to be normal. Now, those were my words. What even is normal? But right, like those were my words. And I remember feeling that way. I remember feeling like there's just something wrong with me and like nobody else, just like everybody else is okay and there's just something wrong with me. Like it felt like I did not think anybody else was going through what I was going through. I just thought this was just some horrible thing that was just happening to me. And it felt very isolated, very alone. And it was almost like it perpetuated the whole feeling, being treated the way I was treated for it, right? And now, as we know, I talk about mental health all the time, and I'm an advocate for mental health and emotional health and physical health and spiritual health and sexual health. Guys, you got to know your sexual health too, right? Got to be mindful of your sexual health. I've talked about that. I've recorded a couple videos on that, but it's just reminding me it's time to cover that topic again too. I digress. Let's get back to this. Mental health. Now, when there is no shame in talking about your mental health, there's no shame in talking about your physical health or your emotional health. We're humans. We all go through all of it. This is part of the human experience. We all go through all of it. And we all have these human bodies that we have to care for, that are caring for us. And we have these emotional bodies. And we have these energetic bodies. And our mental health is an integral part of all of those bodies. They're all connected. And your physical health and your emotional health and your energetic health and your spiritual, all of these different types of health are all tied into and connected to your mental health. And my mental health was really poor most of my life, into my 30s. And my mental health is really strong and resilient now. And it's just like you can turn your physical health around, you can turn your mental health around. This is not medical advice. This is my personal lived experiences that I'm sharing. And you can do it through intention and through a holistic approach and through action and willingness, openness, integration, awareness. I mean, it starts there. For me, it started with a curiosity. It was like, well, first I used to say, there's got to be more to life than this. Like this cannot be it. I cannot feel this way all the time. There has to be more to life than this. And life is full of ebbs and flows, ups and downs, right? What I didn't realize at the time, I mentioned these bodies, okay? I mentioned your physical body, your emotional body, your energetic body. One thing I didn't realize too, as I began my own journey of wanting to heal my mental health and my physical body, because I was suffering from chronic back pain, all kinds of things. And I was wearing back braces, scoliosis, slip disc, piriformis syndrome, chiropractor every week, injections, taking meds for pain, for spasms, for inflammation, having to sit in some sort of like custom made backrest in my car, at my desk, everywhere I went. Couldn't wear high heel shoes, couldn't wear a purse on one shoulder anymore. They said it had to be a crossbody. Just all of these restrictions, and not to mention the pain. And I was constantly manifesting things in my physical body too, in my lymph, like cysts and my lymphatic system, right? Rashes, acne. I was getting like poison ivy, all those kinds of rashes, these things under my arms that would have to be lanced, like cut open and almost drained. And I was having constipation. I was having upset stomachs. I was having gas and gas pains that would be so bad. And this was because I would go days without having bowel movements. This is where my health was. And I would always get sinus infections. I would get the flu, the seasonal, the allergies, like all of that kind of stuff. That was just a given that was going to happen. Colds, things like that. I was tired of living like that. So I said, okay, I'm going to do something different. So this intentional journey of self, which was when I said, instead of looking for the right person, I'm going to become the right person. I gave myself the container to do all this work by choosing a celibacy journey that lasted 7.5+ years, whole episode on that. But it gave me the space to heal, because I was like, if I don't heal my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, all of these things that were suffering. And I was like barely surviving at that point when I started this journey, right? And I just go out there and try to distract myself by jumping into another relationship. Because I did try to do that at first, 4 months after I left. After me being faithful for 15 years in that relationship, 4 months after I left. So the divorce wasn't even final yet, but we had been apart for 4 months, and 4 months into that 1 year that the state requires if you have children before a divorce can be final, I decided to start dating again. And what I ultimately realized by the end of that 1 year was that I was not ready to date. I mean, I did what I needed to do at the time, and I learned a lot. But I was attracting the same types of men. And I realized that the constant and all that was me, and that if I did not change, I was just going to keep repeating the same pattern. Like that's what I was doing. Clearly, that is what I was doing. So I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I was like, let me do something different. If you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. So that's what I decided. And cue the celibacy journey, I'm going to get my health in order. And that includes mental health. On one hand, I feel like I'm jumping around, but on the other hand, I guess we're just going to roll with this. Because like I said, mental health, up until that point, I believe I still maybe would have been like this person I was working alongside that just made the comment later that they were surprised that someone would mention that they had depression. Because I don't think I thought it was something that I should talk about. Now, mind you, this is 10 years ago. I think that a lot has happened in society and culture and all kinds of things in the last 10 years with mental health that have brought it more to the forefront. And I have been part of that, right? I know I have. I've seen it happen in the world, and I am one of the people who is also speaking up about it and making it less taboo and making it more of a really important topic that needs to be talked about. So I want to talk a little bit about what that has looked like for me and how depression shows up in my life today and what that looks like. And I hope that, that this, I trust that this will reach who it needs to reach. And I hope that even if you have never suffered from depression yourself, which is fantastic, that's amazing. And I hope that you'll still stick around, because I'm pretty positive that someone you love, someone that you care about, has been affected by mental health. Like their mental health has been low before, or maybe even right now. So maybe there's something here that will help you support them even better than you already are. Okay, let's see, where do we start? So, I know where I was going to go. I kind of got off track, but I do want to circle back around to this because it's going to be important regarding what we talk about. All of the different bodies I mentioned. The one thing when I started that journey, which the celibacy journey, the becoming the right person, the intentional journey of self is what I call it. And it was like, I'm going to heal my physical health and my mental health and my emotional health, because all of those things needed to be addressed. My spiritual health as well. And what I learned along the way, and I continue to learn, that will always be learning. I'm a student of life. One of the things that quickly became evident that was like a big player in this game is the nervous system. And I was like so unaware of the nervous system. And it wasn't until I started with the breath work and the meditation and the healing my body and started learning these certain doctors that I'm studying, the books that I was reading, things that I was learning. And I was learning about, really fascinated with neuroscience, because a lot of my curiosity was healing my mental health. And so I became curious about science in the brain, something that I had never been really curious about before. But I was like, how does this all work? How does this work? This is inside of me, and this is impacting the way that I experience life every single day. I got to figure this out. Not even figure it out, like solve the puzzle, but I have to open myself up to new possibilities, new information, a new way of existing, a new way of being, a new way of thinking. And that means a new way of believing and experiencing life, because your belief system, thoughts are things you keep thinking, or a belief is a thought that you keep thinking, okay? But it's a little deeper than that. So it's something that you have thought for so long that you believe it to be true. Everything believes it to be true. And The whole thing about that, though, is just because you believe it and it's your belief system and you believe it to be true doesn't mean it's actually true. And there's this whole surrender that has happened in my life, this next level surrender, this absolute surrender that I've allowed to happen. And it's the most beautiful thing I could have done was allow this surrender to happen. In this surrender, and I continue to allow the surrender to happen. In this surrender, I've allowed the path to reveal itself. When I quit trying to do everything I thought I needed to do, everything I had to do, and when I allowed, and when I quit allowing, first, when I quit allowing everything that I'd always been told and believed to be what the absolute truth, and I said, what if I was to allow a wider, more expansive viewpoint? And what if this thing that I've been believing this whole time wasn't actually the truth? And what if there was another possibility? And what if there was another way? And in the process of doing that and embracing that and embodying that, the path revealed itself. And along the path, I started to discover new areas of interest to me that would give me clues, that would teach me, that would pique my curiosity, that would increase my self-awareness, that would take me deeper and allow me to peel back a couple layers and shed a couple masks and discover a little more of who I truly am and what my body is truly capable of. And so on my quest to heal myself, and it wasn't just healing myself, there was this immense desire for longevity. I refused to believe that I had wasted time, or that the best years were behind me, or that any of these things you often hear people say and think and feel and believe. I was like, no. None of that is going to be my truth. I'm going, the rest of my years will be the best of my years. And chronologically, we all age forward and advance. Biologically, that's not the case, though. Biologically, we can age in reverse. And, you know, there is something that I truly believe. I'm going to say this before I continue with that thought. You hear things come into your awareness when you're ready for them. First, they might come in and plant a seed, right? But you're not ready for it yet. And until you're ready, it's just, you're not resonating. It's not on the same frequency. It's like you're not tuned into the right station, even though the station is right there in front of you on your radio. Your radio is right in front of you and the station is there. All the information is there. Everything is there. You just aren't tuned into it yet. You're not on the same frequency. When the time is right in your life, you will turn that dial, you will calibrate, and your calibration will align you with the resonance of this frequency, your frequency, whatever frequency it is that you need at that time. And at that time, you will be, when you have the space to receive it, it will land. Until then, it will hover. It will hover around you. It will be there. You might get glimpses, tastes, seeds will be planted. You'll hear it, you'll dismiss it. And then when you have the space for it, when you are aligned for it, when you've calibrated enough, then it's like the gate opens and then there the information falls into your lap. It was there all along. It's always existed. You just had to remove enough resistance and blocks to allow it in to your field. And so this is what happened on my journey. So circling back around to when I was talking about your biological age, you can age in reverse. So on my journey, when I set that intention, I wanted to heal all of my health, my mental health, emotional, physical, everything. And so I started learning about the brain. Now, this is in neuroscience. This is something, if you would have presented neuroscience to me, 5 years before that, which would have been 15 years ago, no, I did not have space in my life. I had newborns and a toddler, and I was building businesses, and I had no space for that. I didn't even know what I didn't know. I was suffering from mental health and my physical health, all of those things. At that point in time, if you would have introduced this idea, I would have shot it down. I would have dismissed it. I would not have been receptive to it. It wouldn't have resonated. I wasn't ready for it yet. Now I was at a different place in my life. I had let go of some things. I had created some space, and I had a new mission, a new vision for myself, for my life, for my family, for my future. And lo and behold, now I start learning about these new ideas. Now, they're not new ideas by any stretch, but for me, they're new. And again, I had committed to a wider, more expansive viewpoint, and I wanted to heal my body without medicine. And I was reading books, and I was hearing testimonies, and I was watching videos from different events where people were going to learning about this stuff, right? Like workshops and different events. And I was seeing this happen, and I was hearing people talk about it. And I was like, if they can do it, I can do it. If they can do it, I can do it. And I just got really intentional. And then the yoga, the meditation, the breath work, the journaling, these became daily practices. And it didn't happen overnight by any stretch of the imagination. And it wasn't easy, but it was possible. And I knew it was possible. And I knew that I was worthy of a life where I was thriving, and where my physical health was thriving, where my mental health was thriving. And again, I'm in my 30s, guys. Like, I'm in my 30s. I am young. I am young. The idea, like, to be suffering from mental health and physical health and emotional health and spiritual health, for all of those things to be suffering in my 30s, my baby 30s, my early 30s, and then have your whole, what you hope to be a long life ahead of you, but like, what quality of life? It was very heavy. And so I said, I want something different. And this is part of the whole dreamed it then real life it thing. I mean, the very second episode I did on this podcast is my holistic healing journey. And I share about all kinds of things about what this journey has been. This today, I just want to really talk, I guess, a little bit more about mental health, sparked by the two things, by the upcoming guests that I'm so excited to have and you're really going to love. So be sure to tune in next week. And also about just that little comment that was made, and this idea that there's really still people who feel shame around talking about mental health. So here we are on the podcast. I'm talking about my mental health and what that journey has been like. So it took me, I would say, gosh, it's been so long ago now, but I want to say it probably took me about 1 to 2 years to wean off of the meds and that I was taking for the ADHD, the anxiety, and the depression. And that was like, I think that the last one I got off of was the ADHD. It took me a little while to reprogram that limiting belief that what I used to say, the Adderall is what I took. What I used to say, I remember telling my mom that I can't function without Adderall. I could not function without Adderall. That was the narrative. That was the story that I was telling myself and the world. And I'm sure my doctor that was prescribing it to me, and of course my mom or whatever. It was such a crutch, and it was such a thing that I had my whole life been told you need. And I had just gotten so used to taking it. And so there was another thing that happened when I got off all these meds, particularly probably the Adderall, because that is an appetite suppressant. So I didn't even know what my own, you don't know what you don't know. I don't even think that I realized that I didn't even totally know how to tune into my own hunger and fullness cues, because I didn't even really know what they were. I had gotten used to drowning them out with meds, and thinking that that was okay. And look, let me say this right now too, just to say this, because when I was in the trenches of depression, anxiety, all the things, the last thing that I would have wanted was someone that I perceived was telling me that there was something wrong with taking medicine. Nope, that's not what I'm saying. So I just want to be clear about this. Does the medicine work? Yes, it works. Did it help regulate my mood? Did it help me? Now, also, it made me feel numb, not like myself. There were all these other side effects too, right? But I guess what I'm saying is this. I'm not saying it didn't work. And maybe at the time, that was what I needed. Then I reached a point in my journey where I asked myself, because the quality of your life depends on the quality of the questions you ask yourself. So I asked myself, is this what I want? And the answer was no. And I said, is there anything I can do about it? And the answer was yes. And I said, okay, well then what can I do about it? And the answer was something that you've never done before. And instead of doing what I'd always done, going to the same doctor, getting the same prescriptions, just doing more of the same, I started researching, and I started learning, and I started reading, and I started getting curious, and I started not caring what other people thought. And I know that might seem easier said than done, but it gets easier. And I realized that it was possible for me. It was possible that I could really do it. And then I felt excited. And I used affirmations. I affirmed who I was becoming. I had a really clear vision. And every day, I set the intention to embody the version of myself that was thriving. And some days, that was really easy to do. And some days, that was not. The thing is that when I committed to this quest, and again, y'all know the journey of self, it was all about self-love. It was like I had little to no self-worth before this journey, and little to no self-love, and little to no self-acceptance. And I was wearing lots of masks and hiding behind lots of curtains and praying nobody pulled them back. And I didn't want to hide anymore. And so one of the things I learned at the very beginning of this journey of self, actually, it was one of the things that I started learning before I left the marriage. There were a handful of lessons that, my journey really started 2 years before I left. That inner work started there when I was still in the marriage. And that's why I'll often say, or you've maybe heard me say before when I talk about that relationship, that we grew up and we grew apart. And I think that there was a marker 2 years before I left the marriage. There was an event, and it kind of marked what I would say was the beginning of my journey. I began on my own, my inner journey. And it was something that he supported, but he didn't also do. Like, he would buy me the books of the authors, the people I liked, I was learning from, or whatever, their little the courses that they had. But it was not anything that he was interested in learning about or pursuing himself. And so 2 years of being on that journey of personal development inside of a marriage that was not being done by both partners, and then ultimately that is resulted in the marriage ending and us separating. And all that to say this, I'm going to circle back around. So one of the lessons I learned before the intentional journey of self, so really when I was still there, that 2-year period, was shame off me. Shame off me. Shame off me. And it's one of my mantras now. Shame off me. I carried so much shame around my mental health. And I think that I realized when this person I was working alongside that made the comment about going to the movies, you have diarrhea, you wouldn't say you had diarrhea. I realized how much I've healed because I was so unbothered by this comment, and I saw it for what it was. And it was not an attack on the person who was cold plunging, sharing that it helped with their depression. It wasn't an attack on me as someone who had suffered from mental health illnesses or disorders or whatever you want to call it, pretty much, well, definitely more than half my life, the majority of my life is what would be accurate. And or anyone else that may be having mental health issues. It was a projection of how they view the world and through their own lens and their own experiences and the shame that they've been programmed to feel around mental health. Guys, it's nothing to be ashamed of. And it's something that needs to be prioritized. And even if, and again, I'm not giving medical advice, but I think that there's no I thinking. I'm claiming, I am saying, I am stating, I think I'm not going to be wishy-washy about this. I'm going to be firm about this because I really and truly, this is what I believe. That we talk about mental health and that we prioritize mental health, and that when our mental health is not at its best, we take the time we need to nurture it and to give it the attention that it deserves. And when someone else's mental health is not the best, we don't judge them for that. We show compassion and we ask ourselves, what could we do to support this person? We tend, as a society, at least in the West, which is where I live, the culture I live in, we tend to judge people for their health, be that their physical health, right? Their mental health, their emotional health. People are quick to judge. And you don't know the whole story, and not everyone has the tools. And not everyone has the belief system yet that it's even possible for them to live in a body where they have good mental health, they have good physical health, and they have good emotional health, good spiritual health, and good health in general. So I have healed my mental health. I have healed my emotional health and my physical health. So I mentioned earlier about my body, the back, all of that, of course, is all healed. I live pain-free and I have a very mobile body. It's very flexible. It's very resilient and strong. And I have a lot of, what is the word? It was just on the tip of my tongue. But range of motion, that's what I was going for. Like range of motion in my shoulders. And I've had surgery on my shoulder before. I didn't think I would ever have this amazing range of motion that I have now. And in my hips and my back, my spine, my neck, just all of the things, my ankles, my wrist, everything. And I'm grateful for that. But this didn't just happen. This has, again, come with intention and effort and discipline and belief system, believing that it's possible. And the mental health, so all of the things, the modalities I mentioned before with the breath work, the meditation, the yoga practice, yoga on and off the mat, and the journaling have all contributed. So, and I said it took me about 2 years to wean off. And the last thing was the ADHD medicine. That was the last limiting belief I had, that I really kind of had to rewire that, right? So since then, it's been years, 8 years or so, more maybe even, since I've taken any of that or anything else. And I feel alive and I feel energized and I feel focused, and I feel clarity, and Claire, yeah, the gifts of Claire. Actually, I do. For like all those years that I was taking all those meds, I was so disconnected from my own intuition. And now it's like I have strengthened my intuition, and you can do this too. Everyone can do this. And we all have the ability to tap in and tune into our inherent gifts. Our gifts of Claire is what I call them. Clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience, clairvoyance. These are the gifts of Claire, the gift of seeing, the gift of smelling, the gift of sight, right? The gift of knowing, the gift of hearing. All of these different gifts. This is your intuition. Some people call it psychic or a sixth sense. Any of these things, and look, there's a difference, and then there's not a difference. Your intuition, we all have these senses, and some of us have been conditioned to turn them off, close them down, shut them out, tune them out, don't listen. That's crazy. You'll be crazy, right? Like all of these things. It's, again, taboo, kind of like even talking about mental health. And some people are, again, so disconnected, be that they're on so many different meds like I was, or that you're just so consumed with the game, for lack of a better word, the matrix, you're just all of the noise, whether that's the reality TV, the social media celebrities you're following, the gossip or whatever. We get so, and that was me, by the way. Back when I was also doing all this, just suffering for all the mental health, every Sunday, I used to work all through college and beyond. For 7 years, I worked at this one little place. I was a bartender. On Sundays, I worked the double shift. And I would walk on my lunch break to the little nearby gas station every Sunday and get the latest little Us Weekly or Star or whatever the little trashy gossip magazine was. I bought it every week. That was just how I distracted myself, and I guess tried to make myself feel better about my own life, was by, reading those magazines that are just really awful. Anyway, getting back. So you're so disconnected from your own intuition because you're not listening to it. You're listening to everybody else's story. You're getting into all the drama. And you're tuning out your own intuition because you're listening to what everybody else's opinions about what you should do about your life and how you should live your life. And guys, it can be a perpetual loop if you're not aware of it. I know I was stuck in it for a while. And when you reconnect with yourself and your intuition, then you get to start experiencing those gifts of Claire. And if you like it, if you like what you're experiencing, you can develop them even further through intention, through practice, through seeking out guides and mentors and leaders and teachers and coaches and people who can help you develop those gifts. But again, like I was talking about earlier, when you open yourself up to the wider, more expansive viewpoints and you surrender, the path reveals itself. And when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And that's what was happening with my mental health. Getting back to, I started learning about the brain, and then I started learning about the neuroscience, and then the neural pathways, and then about meditation and visualization, and then the breath work. And then so that led to the nervous system. And then I started learning about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and about the vagus nerve. And I started learning about biology and the human body and how all of these different systems work together. And how if I want to experience harmony within my body, that there has to be an inner state of harmony. Like if I want, or rather, if I want to experience harmony in my life, there has to be harmony happening inside of my body. There has to be an inner state of harmony. And there wasn't. And so that was the journey. And that has been the beautiful part. And as far as how I've done it, guys, I've got episodes about that. I've got blog posts about that. I've got coaching containers about that. I've got thousands, probably over 1,000 Instagram posts about that. I've shared this story, but that's not the part. I want to talk about how I did it, but then I want to talk about where I am now. So I got to the point where I'm not taking any meds, and I'm taking a holistic approach, and I'm looking at all of these different aspects of my life and healing all of these different parts of myself. And nowadays, how does depression show up in my life? First off, it's nothing that I would label as depression, but that doesn't mean that I don't still have these moments or these little periods when things get really heavy. Because I do. And they are few and far between, but they do happen. And one of the ways that I handle them now is that, for one, I no longer identify as someone who has depression. I don't identify as someone who has ADHD, and I don't identify as someone who has anxiety. I used to identify as those things, and if you've ever heard me talk before about on this, then you'll know that the subconscious mind will never outperform your self-image. And so if you do not see yourself as a wealthy person, a healthy person, a kind person, a generous person, honest person, if you cannot see yourself, if you don't believe yourself to be honest, then your subconscious mind won't ever, you will find ways to sabotage that, right? Your subconscious mind will never outperform your self-image, is what I'm saying. So, I used to identify, I have depression, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I have ADHD, and it became part of my identity. It became part of who I was, how I would talk about myself to other people. And I quit doing that. And I started speaking differently about myself. I started thinking differently about myself. I started believing differently about myself. And then I started embodying that new belief system. And Neville Goddard has a quote that said, "Assume you already are that person. If this assumption is persisted upon until it becomes your dominant feeling, the attainment of your ideal is inevitable." And so that's what I did. I continued to assume that I was already that person who was able to live a life free from those meds, from the medication. The medications that I was taking for my health, mental health and physical health. And it is the most liberating feeling to be living inside of this vision that I had for myself nearly a decade ago. Like truly to know that I set this intention for myself and that I continued to do that, to assume that I was already that person and to persist upon it and to open myself to the different modalities and these different doing these things. I would have, if you would have told me 10 years before I started meditating every day that that's what I would be doing, I would have rolled my eyes and said, oh my gosh, you're crazy, and probably made fun of you because that's where I was in my life at the time. Okay. And that's okay. And we all change and we're meant to change. We're humans. That's like everything changes. And now when I think I can think back to the most recent time that I had what was a little bout of heaviness, sadness, what would seem, look like depression back in the day. But I didn't identify it with it like that now, or I don't. Or again, most recently when I had one of these things, it's been now, nearly a year ago. But these moments, when they come now, it comes and it's more of a dark night of the soul, ego death. When I'm experiencing these things now, it is because because my body's very cleared now, because I'm plant-based. I'm real mindful about what I'm putting into my body, what I consume. I don't watch the news. Y'all know all that. I don't read the news. I don't watch the news. I'm just mindful of what I consume in every way, what I listen to, what I watch, what I eat. I don't drink alcohol. I've maybe had 3 drinks in all of 2025, and we're in October. So and guys, this isn't a boring or restrictive life. I have a lot of fun, just so you know. That's another thing that would have surprised me if you'd have told me that 15 years ago. But all that to say this. So now there's not all this fogginess. There's a lot of mental clarity, and just I'm really in tune with my body. And with my emotions, my energetic body, my emotional body, all the bodies. And so when I will go through one of these periods that it is heavy and everything feels heavy, I see it for what it is. It's a dark night of the soul. It's an ego death. It's a transition. It's an awakening. It's a rebirth. It is a portal. It is me being thrust into this next chapter of my life. And I know that that's what it is. And these come and I'm able to navigate through them. I've got episodes on this as well that I just get into this. But I'm just letting you know that doesn't mean I don't ever have these little periods. And it'll last maybe about a week or so. Maybe it'll last a little bit longer than that even. But it's a transition period, and it's a clearing to create space for something new. And so I see it for what it is, and I don't identify with it as depression. I'm not a depressed person. And I recognize, though, some of my old patterns that were tied to depression. And so when I first see the signs of those things start to creep in, that is letting me know, oh, wait, that's an old pattern that I used to have when I identified with depression. So that's letting me know that something needs my attention here. Something's a little off balance. And let me give you an example. If the plates were to start piling in the sink, that is one of my old depression things that I struggled with, was like keeping on top of the dishes. That was really hard for me. Or like keeping my bed made or things like that. But so like nowadays, if it gets to the point, if like plates were to start to stack up, for instance, in those moments that I was talking about, where like nearly a year ago, the last time I had one of these little ego death, dark night of the soul type of moments, like during that period, guaranteed the plates were like stacking up in the sink. And that's letting me know, okay, something's not balanced here in my life. Like these are old patterns. I am struggling here to do the things that are just the basic things for me right now, that are just normally part of my life, right? And so I give myself compassion, I give myself empathy, and again, I don't jump to identify with it as depression. It's as like part of the human experience. And I also have a really great support system, and I have all the tools in my toolbox, and I use the tools in my toolbox, and this is all really helpful. Now, I somehow have already been talking for over an hour, and I know I've jumped around. I have nothing, like I said, not even a piece of paper. And I wasn't even really sure where I wanted to go. And I'm honestly, and probably until I listen back, I'm not even sure where I went. But this is the biggest thing I wanted you to take away. I'm talking about my mental health. Why? Because in my opinion, it's something that is okay to talk about. And there are people who are suffering in silence, and maybe you're suffering in silence because you have a parent or someone that brought you up that had a mindset like the person I was working alongside, and that was like, oh my gosh, why on earth would they talk about having depression? Gasp, right? Like, it's so, you don't talk about that, guys. So maybe if that was how you were raised and you feel like it's not something you can talk about, you gotta realize that it's okay to talk about, and you got to get the help that you need. And maybe that help is medicine right now. Again, I'm not knocking it. I'm sharing my story because medicine is obviously what my parents thought was the only option back when I was 11, and were able to have the doctors on board with that choice. And so, I don't, and then even as an adult, again, I told you, even after my pregnancy, so here I am, a grown-ass adult having my own children, and I'm, at this point, I'm choosing to get back on it. I guess because I, at that time, felt like that was the only solution I knew of, because that was the only one that had ever been presented to me. And so maybe that's the only solution that you feel like you have, because that's the only solution that's ever been presented to you. That's why I want to have this conversation. It's not medical advice. I'm not telling you to go stop taking your meds if you're taking them right now. Again, don't just do that. You got to talk to your doctor. You can't just do that because you listened to some podcast. But I am here to tell you, I haven't taken any medicine in over 8 years, and I'm thriving, and my health is better than ever. And so it's possible. And if I can do it, you can do it, but it took intention, and it took work, and it took reprogramming my subconscious mind and rewiring all these beliefs, these old programs I was running on. I'm grateful for my life experiences, and I'm grateful that I have lived with depression, that I identified as someone who had depression for as long as I did, and ADHD and anxiety, because I know that there are so many people who are also either suffering from it now, or who have suffered from it, or who have a loved one, someone that they care about that's close to them that's suffering from it. And you're not alone. And I think that being able to have lived so much of my life from that place does give me a perspective. And it does allow me now, much like with my businesses, I've gotten to live on both sides of it. I've gotten to experience life in both ways. And I think that's important. Some people have only ever been poor and they've never experienced what it's like to be wealthy. And some people have only ever been wealthy and never experienced what it's like to be poor. And some people have only ever been healthy and never experienced what it's like to be unhealthy. And some people have only ever been unhealthy and never experienced what it's like to be healthy. And I think that when you have, and of course I could keep going, people who have experienced both sides of something, the polarity of any given topic, situation, theme, experience, whatever you want to say. There's something to be said about that, right? You have a different perspective when you have experienced violence and then you've experienced peace, like an environment that was, a violent, a hostile, aggressive environment, maybe a household or something like that. And then you've experienced one that is peaceful and calm and nurturing and kind, right? And that contrast is going to contribute to who you are and how you view things and how you move through the world and how you're able to support others and have empathy for others. And so I wouldn't take back any of that. It wasn't easy. Life wasn't easy. And it often felt hard and sad and challenging and sad and frustrating and all the things. But you know what? Man, there's a saying that says that the branches of a tree can't reach heaven if the roots don't reach hell. And maybe one of the reasons that I feel so freaking grateful for this life that I feel so blessed to be living and experiencing today, it is beyond my wildest imagination. It is everything that I dreamed it would be and more. And it continues to get better every single day. And I don't think that I could experience this level of bliss and peace and joy had I not also experienced such low lows. And there have been some really low lows. And so I'm not ashamed to talk about my mental health. And I want this to be a safe space for you to talk about it too. And look, no judgment to people who or still feel like talking about mental health is taboo. That just lets me know that, their belief system still is holding on to some shame around the topic for whatever reason. And so sending love to them too. And I'm sending love to you guys. See you next week for that awesome guest. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It. I hope today's episode sparked something powerful within you. Remember, every step you take towards your vision counts, no matter how small. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a second to hit that subscribe button or leave a review. That would be amazing. Or share the podcast with someone who's ready to bring their dreams into reality too. And if you're looking to dive deeper, connect with me on social media at Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, or at BE_what you want. Or visit dreameditThenRealLifedIt.us for more resources on aligning your life, business, and dreams. Until next time, keep dreaming and keep manifesting your dreams into real life. Love you, friends.